Hello students, welcome to the business law session for the BBA 5th semester. So in our previous class we were discussing about the free consent. So we had studied what is consent, what is free consent. Then we had to study about here when the consent is not said to be free. So in my previous video, I had discussed about one element which vitiates the consent. Vitiate means which breaks the consent, or what we say the consent is unfree if it is obtained by coercion. Coercion is force. And there we had decided one case, that is Chinnaya versus mainly the Ranganayakama versus Alwar Seth case we had discussed there. So that is where the consent is here not said to be free because it is obtained by here force. And what is coercion we have seen. So that is mainly the thing here, the first one. Now the second aspect where the consent is not said to be free if it is obtained by undue influence. If the consent is obtained by an undue influence, then we say that here the consent is not free. So section 16 describes about this undue influence. So we will discuss this because these two are very important. And the rest fraud, misrepresentation and other mistake. So this we are going to take up in one more class. So these two are very important. You can get undue influence also for 2 marks. What do you mean by undue influence? And which are the circumstances? Here are examples for undue influence. And the law also presumes in some cases about undue influence. So in those circumstances, undue influence, what is that? Undue influence, we have to know examples for this. We have to study that. So keeping that in view, section 16 here deals with this undue influence. So where it is stated, a contract is said to be induced by undue influence where the relation subsisting between the parties are such that one is in a position to dominate the will of the other. This is the first aspect. See, look at mainly the thing here, that the relation in a contract here where what is undue influence means where the relation subsisting between the parties. So between the two parties, one of them will be in a dominating position. He will be dominating position over the will of the another. So this is the first aspect. And he uses that position to obtain an unfair advantage over the other. So that person uses his position to gain unfair advantage on the other. So this is what you mean by here undue influence. So we can say that the consent is obtained here by undue influence. So there are two very important essentials to be there. So what are those two essentials? The first one here is one person must be in a dominating position. He must be in a dominating position in the contract. And second one is that here he uses that position to obtain unfair advantage. So if he is in a dominating position, if he doesn't use his position for unfair advantage, then it cannot be undue influence. So here he should use that position. He must be in dominating position. You must be using that position to gain unfair advantage. So then we can say that here this is the undue influence. The consent is obtained by undue influence. This is what is called as an undue influence there. So if undue influence is used and the consent is obtained, then the consent is not free here. It vitiates the consent. The consent is not said to be free. This is what you mean by the meaning of this. So we will try to understand one example. Taking one example. For example, here we have a principal and a part-time lecturer. A principal and a part-time lecturer. Naturally, here principal will be in the dominating position. He will be in a dominating position. And if he uses his position for unfair advantage here from the part-time lecturer, then the consent of the part-time lecturer is said to be have obtained by undue influence. So this is, here just I give you an example of this. Here undue influence. Likewise, the law says that undue influence can be presumed, where here a person, it is the relation that here persists between a police officer and a person on the trial, or a person in a convict, a person in a prison. So a police officer and a criminal. So there the position, here the police officer is in a here dominating position. Likewise between a doctor and a patient, doctor is in a here the dominating position. If he uses his position for unfair advantage, then here the consent is said to be obtained by undue influence. For example, A is a doctor and B is the patient. A says, without operation your disease will be not cured, and for that here it is here mainly necessary that I should conduct the surgery or the operation, and for that you have to transfer your land which is located just beside my hospital here in my favor. The B, who is a patient, he is in a mainly a position where to be dominated. He says because he should be cured. So he says yes. So in this circumstance the consent is said to be obtained by undue influence. So he is inducing that person to enter into a contract. He is influencing his position. Otherwise B is not ready to sell his here land. But now here the person is dominating and he uses his position to gain the unfair advantage over that person. So that is here an example for undue influence. That is here a doctor and a patient. Spiritual teacher and his disciple. That also the undue influence is presumed. So like this undue influence. So when in a contract here undue influence is there, here we have to see what is the relation between the parties, how the relation subsists, how the relation is there between the parties. If you look at that, mainly then we can come to know that here the undue influence used or not. This is the thing that should be known. So now usually you may get one question here. What is undue influence? You may get in your examination. But they may ask you a question. Here, who is a Parda Nashin here lady or a woman? Pardashin woman. So Pardashin woman is here the woman who has been kept away from the public life. She never involves herself in the public life. She is always aloof, isolated. So likely here there may be presumption here in the law that her consent can be obtained by undue influence because she is not aware of the social life. She is always in an isolated life. So Pardanashin woman can be influenced here. A person who is holding a dominant position, he can influence her will and he can take unfair advantage. So for that reason, even in this circumstance, the presumption arises. Pardashin woman, here consent, here the law has presumed that there is a here undue influence. So when undue influence is used and the consent is obtained, the consent is said not to be free. And hence the validity of the contract is lost and the contract is not valid and it cannot be enforced. It can be enforced, but what is the condition? At the option of the person who is a victim to that undue influence. So in other words, the consequence or impact is the contract becomes voidable in nature. The contract becomes voidable in nature. At the option of the person who is a victim to the undue influence, he can either resign the contract or he can enforce the contract. It is enforceable. It is enforceable at the option of the party who is the victim to that undue influence, but not the other party who has used the undue influence. So undue influence is one of the element where the consent can be vitiated, or we can say that consent is not free. So these are 15 and 16. What we have studied is coercion and the undue influence. Both are very important here in the free consent there. And the rest what are there? The fraud, the misrepresentation and mistake. So these are the here mainly the three aspects which I will conclude it in my next class. In mainly the Tuesday class, I will be winding up this free consent and we will proceed with the next element, that is a lawful object.